Okay, I think I'm back.
Hey, you have the aircraft, Rob.
Um, all right. Hey, listen, thank you very much, Mike, for inviting me. It's good to know that you finally got around to me after you went through those other 8 people last month and finally came back to me. But and again, just so you have complete sympathy for me, I didn't just cut out on you. About 4 days before the presentation, my wife slipped on the ice out here in Chicago and busted her hip. It was pretty exciting, and I think that as a second career, mine is not going to be in home health care. Not a chance. But she's doing better. Anyway, so I just wanted to tell you that I'm also a member of the Pilots Association out here at Chicago Executive Airport, in case any of you ever stray past. Well, I guess some of you might have if you've been to Oshkosh, but we're at Chicago Executive Airport, just north of O'Hare. Also, what kind of led me to this topic is that some of my other volunteer duties are as a member of the Single Pilot Working Group at the National Business Aviation Association. And so we get involved with lots of juicy, meaty topics. But tonight we're going to talk about flying VFR into IMC, or not flying VFR into IMC. And that was a really great slide I saw that Mike put on a little while ago about it's important to know when not to fly. And I think that's really what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm not much of a lecturer. I'm kind of more of a storyteller on audio and writing and things like that. So I'm not really going to have a lot of slides here. I'd rather converse with you all, just like I do at lunch every Friday with my friends up at the airport. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, whatever, please just, Mike, you know what to do. We shout it out or something like that. So feel free to interrupt. And also, I was told that I should stand this up here. There we go. Any Trojans out there? I'm not actually a Trojan. I'm just a parent of a Trojan. So I think this sweatshirt cost me a few $100,000. And my daughter lives up the road from you there in West Hollywood, and she works for CBS. And she lets me come out to, display my sweatshirt every so often. But let's dig into it. I think this is going to be a fun session. And remember, tonight, we're not solving the problem of VFR flight into IMC. We're only touching on some of the causes. And of course, one of you might come up with a solution. But please, again, shout it out. So to begin with, I want to read something that was an accident, part of an accident report for a VFR flight into IMC. And it said, quote, "An unwise decision to embark on a flight which would necessitate flying solely by instruments when the pilot was not properly certified or qualified. Contributing factors included serious deficiencies in obtaining a weather briefing prior to the flight," unquote. If you've ever read any of these accident reports that have, or even incident reports of people flying into the clouds when they're VFR, they all pretty much read like that. What makes this one interesting, though, is that it was written in 1959. So here we are 60 years later. I think that's right. Yes. Okay. 60 years later, and we're still killing people with the same old thing. The AOPA's Air Safety Institute produces the Null report every year. Some of you may have seen it. If not, it's really worth reading because it tells you about what the real problems are in GA. And the most recent one said that the number of weather-related accidents declined in the 2018 data they looked at from 42 to 23. That's great. That is a sizable reduction in weather accidents. But what wasn't good was that of the 14 that involved VFR flight into IMC, 13 were fatal. And that's the one constant you're going to see here, is that most of these VFR into IMC accidents result in fatalities. I mean, to be fair, we don't have any data on successful weather penetrations, but after all, who's going to talk about that? Because that's a violation of the regs, and I don't want to pin anybody down. In fact, we have a few polls coming up in a little bit, and just so you know, they are completely anonymous. All I see and all that Mike sees are the total numbers. So feel free to be completely honest. Another thought about VFR into IMC is that we often think about it from a fixed wing aircraft perspective. That's just not the only case. Helicopters are just as likely, if not more so, to encounter VFR into IFR weather situations. I mean, did you know that helicopters can actually legally fly VFR with a statute mile, 1/2 statute mile visibility and clear of clouds? I mean, it's always a good reminder to me. To me, that's ILS minimums. So I can't imagine being VFR down there anywhere when in those kinds of conditions. The U.S. Helicopter Safety Team said recently that when they reviewed the data for the last 20 years, 130 fatal accidents were attributed to VFR into IMC. And what I thought was kind of interesting was the conclusions that the report made. It said it's been hard to find answers. Excuse me. It's been hard to find answers as to why these accidents continue to happen. And then a few paragraphs later, it said, actually, they all stem from failed planning, lack of understanding, and poor decision making. Ta-da! That's it, folks. I mean, it really is. And also surprising is that there are a number of VFR into IMC accidents that involve pilots that hold an instrument rating. Who'd have thunk, huh? So here's our first poll. How many of you hold an instrument rating, and how many of you are current? How many of you hold an instrument rating, and how many of you are current? And two, when I say current, do you feel current? I mean, that's the most important.
Numbers are coming in pretty strong here.
Let's see.
Can you see them, Rob?
Yeah, I see about it's about even Steven here on the number of pilots that hold an instrument rating.
Let's close that out. It looks like they stopped coming in, so everybody should be able to see those results now.
So it looks like most of you are not current. It happens. So decision-making factors, let's see, should I? Let's see if I can cut that out here. There we go. So if decision-making, I was trying to reduce. Mike, it's your control. I can't make the poll disappear.
Oh, well, I turned off sharing. So here, does that help?
Let's see. Let me try it again. Okay, let's see if it stays off this time. So if decision-making is a significant factor in IMC, be aware that it's really easy in a situation like this to talk about what somebody else did wrong. We're sitting in a seminar or we're behind a laptop. The answers come pretty easily. Oh, I'd never do that. Oh boy, that pilot must have been pretty dumb to take that action. We've all been there. But in the real world, with a moving airplane, pilots often don't think so clearly. You have lots of issues going on. But I just want to keep this in perspective that poor decision making, poor judgment, it's not really limited to just VFR into IMC accidents. We could look at a number of risk factors, and one that came up just last week is a pilot flying a Piper M600 on a 500-mile cross-country flight from Central Texas to Central Florida. He landed in Florida, experienced a runway excursion, left the runway, and pranged his new airplane. Now, neither the pilot nor the passenger was hurt. That's the good news. It happens, right? What's more, what is there else to talk about? In fact, some of you may have followed the news. Piper had an airworthiness, I don't think it was an AD, but a maintenance directive that related to tire pressure on the nose gear. Again, for context, for those of you that may not have seen or flown an M600, it's a very fast single engine turboprop, similar to a TBM, if you've seen one of those. But here's where the decision making and the risks and things kind of take a different turn. The pilot on this flight, again, Central Texas to Florida, 500 miles or so, he had less than 100 hours total time, 54 in type. This was his first flight without an instructor, and he had no instrument rating. Maybe a few hours of instrument flight. According to the person at the dealership that sold the airplane, at the time of the purchase, the pilot did not meet the flight experience for the insurance company to provide coverage for him to use the airplane, and he never even bothered to go to the factory authorized training. He did though, or I'm sorry, his flight instructor did though. So what's so interesting about this? I mean, other than he did what? All by himself? Think for a minute. The M600 likes to cruise in the low to mid 20s. And going back to your classes of airspace, above 18,000, you need to be instrument rated on an IFR flight plan. So can you imagine that this pilot maybe ever penetrated a cloud in an airplane that has a cockpit like one of the jets Mike is always showing me pictures of? Yeah, but guess what? Wait, there's more. Okay, the fellow flew the airplane 500 miles. He had no insurance. So what does that tell you about this person's take on risk? Low risk, high risk? Oh, and all he did was, blow the tire and prang the prop and whatever. It could have been so much worse. But anyway, one of my comrades at flying, Martha King, who lives down the road from y'all there in San Diego, said recently, VFR flying for transportation is not dependable. It has the additional downside of luring pilots into taking risks that cause VFR into IMC accidents. But what if the bad weather snuck up on you? I mean, it happens. In fact, I'll tell you a story of a friend of mine who's here with me tonight behind the camera. So, but I was taking my daughter and her boyfriend for a little sightseeing trip a couple of Christmases ago in Chicagoland, and the forecast called for occasional snow showers, and those are really fun. Although I'm sure none of you have ever seen any. but it's like drizzle, except it's frozen. But anyway, so we were going to go down the lakeshore, and I was showing Clarence, my daughter's boyfriend, who was in the right seat, what happens when it starts to, you see a snow shower coming, and we could see some down around O'Hare and at some other spots. And, as we're flying, I'm pointing this out and that out to him. And I looked ahead and I went, oh, it's getting a little gray. And we were in a snow shower before I even knew what happened, and all I could see was straight down. Well, luckily, I knew enough to transition from straight down to the instruments, because this is just an old 172. Thank God it had instruments. And I said, this is going to require some serious business here. And I, of course, made a 180-degree turn out of it, making certain that I wasn't gaining or losing altitude or any of that sort of thing. And once we popped back out of it, maybe 30 seconds had passed, and Clarence looked at me. He said, "What is going on?" He said, "We were just flying along. I could see everything. You were explaining things, and then you got real quiet, and you were looking down here at that panel. What happened?" And I explained it to him. But again, what I learned, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this tonight, is that I haven't flown into a situation like that in years, because I'm almost always on an IFR flight plan, which of course is, you don't care about that sort of thing. But it happened like that. And, I thought about some poor fellow that, or woman who had maybe the minimum flight experience in the cockpit on instruments. It might not have turned out so well. So my other poll question, Mike, are you ready? Have you ever encountered clouds inadvertently? Okay. So far, no.
And I'll second that, how insidious that is and how quick it comes up, especially at nighttime.
Oh, yes. In fact, we're going to talk about that too. And Mike makes a very good point. Look at it. It's almost 50-50 again. And it is so much worse at night because you can't see anything coming. So good for you. For those folks who have inadvertently entered a cloud, you're among the minority of people that are still here to tell the tale. Because again, it comes on you so fast that many people just don't know how to cope with it. So that's one thing we're going to talk about tonight, is how do we, not just VFR into IMC, but what can we do to prevent these kinds of situations? Now, I spoke to a couple of friends of mine as I prepared this, and one of them, if you've never heard him, Dr. Tony Kern, who's a great safety guy from Convergent Performance in Colorado Springs, which is a human factors and a performance training company. But Tony is a retired Air Force colonel, and he was a B-1 check pilot, and he just lives for human factors. The why do pilots do what they do? And he said, if you're not instrument rated and proficient, you have no business being there around the clouds. If you do it anyway, know that you're gambling with your life and the lives of your passengers. And I can tell you that is exactly what went through my brain when I flew into that snow shower and I realized all I could see was down. So in the Kobe Bryant accident that I'm sure you've probably read more about than you care to, the NTSB found that this experienced instrument-rated copter pilot lost control of the machine when he thought he'd just make a steep climb and punch through the clouds of a small thin deck. Obviously, it didn't work. So why would a pilot do that? What would Tony Kern say? What's the human factor? It's easy. He thought he could make it. He thought he had control of the machine, but he didn't, not in the end. So, and Tony spoke to that issue, and he said one element that adds significant pressure on the pilot, maybe they burned through half their gas thinking, yeah, if I do get into weather, I've got a place to run. At least at first they think that. But when they're only 20 minutes from home or 20 minutes from their destination, everything changes. We get into the get home itis, which is a fancy name for continuation bias. Pilots think that this has worked so far. If I can just get through the next 10 minutes, I'm going to be fine. It'll all be gravy. Except they don't sometimes. Now, I'm not a clinician, and I'm not a doctor. I don't really know much about physiology except when something doesn't work. And I know enough to know, though, like some of you, that abrupt maneuvers when you're in the clouds or in an area of marginal visibility, it can play absolute havoc with your brain, with your inner ear, and with your sense of reality. And on the Kobe Bryant accident, the pilot tried that abrupt maneuver and he just thought he would punch through the clouds. So again, it didn't work. And that man had a lot of time in that copter. So I'm just curious, for those of you who do study physiology, like I do every night, I stay up reading about it. No, I'm kidding. How many of you have ever experienced the spinning seat, where somebody puts you in a chair, spins you around a couple of times one way, back the other way, and then has you try and identify which way you're headed, up, down, left, right. So I'm just wondering if anybody has ever tried that. Let's see. Yes.
I threw your other flight simulator question on this one too, so we'll get both of those at once here, Rob.
Okay.
And hey, do you have slides you're supposed to be going through? I still see the original ones. So.
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't want. See, I'm dangerous with PowerPoint, and I already knew that, so I knew enough to stay away from it.
So you've
so
had
once
an
I got it
introduction.
running,
You're not.
I have continuous fuel here. I'm not going to run out of gas. I'm not going to change anything. But anyway, so
not signed off for solo yet, huh?
No, not signed off. Definitely not signed off for solo. Mike did one training session with me, and I need more. Training than that. So again, 40% of you say you've tried it, and for those of you who haven't, it is the most incredible thing you'd ever experience. And what they did to me the first time I tried it, they put a broomstick or something in my lap so that I could act like I was moving the stick left or right or backwards and forwards, spun me around a few times and said, okay, quick, move the stick to where you think you need to go in order to right the airplane. And I did that, and they said, are you sure? I went, yeah. And I opened my eyes, and I wasn't even close. I mean, I thought I was climbing to the left, and I was actually in a tight right turn, descending. And that could happen to you in the clouds, in an airplane, faster than you can even believe. And boy, you better be ready to look at those instruments and be able to interpret them. This other one about Microsoft Flight Simulator, I threw that in because I've suddenly become a simulator pilot like so many other people that haven't flown much this year. Let's see, there we go. What happened to our slide, Mike? It's gone. Let's see.
We wanted to see your beautiful face.
Oh, well, that's okay. But how do I get back to my slide at the end? Because it's got some cool stuff on it. So I'll be asking you for
just
that
do
later.
that share screen thing again.
Okay, yeah, I know. That's what you said last time. So, but another buddy of mine, Bob Wright, is the former manager of the FAA's General Aviation and Commercial Division. And Bob and I worked on some safety topics together at the the NBA's safety committee. And he told me that of all the accident categories he deals with, this is one of the most avoidable he's run across, because in-flight observation, that's where you look out the windows and you see things, and then that's supposed to make your brain think better, as well as the cockpit technology we have these days just offers all kinds of solutions. And autopilot, for one, is a great way to avoid VFR into IMC. But of course, you have to know how to operate the autopilot. And even when people are learning to fly in fairly sophisticated airplanes these days, instructors say, "Oh, no, we're not going to turn on that autopilot. You're going to learn to do it the old-fashioned way," which is good to a degree until that student or that recently licensed pilot gets out there and gets themselves into one of these situations, and they realize they don't even know how to turn the darn thing on. Tony Kern also said that he believes that we don't train pilots about the most important things, like what they shouldn't do, because the risk thresholds. Maybe a better way to say it is they don't train people on the thresholds up to the point where it becomes really scary. We just kind of talk around them. And of course, one thing think about that M600 pilot before, some people love taking risks. It's just them. He thinks that we should evaluate people for their risk tolerance before they even start to fly, just so that, if nothing else, the poor instructor has some idea of what what could happen with these people. Of course, but by definition, pilots, we're all kind of natural risk takers. I mean, we're not afraid to fly, but I guess the issue is how do we influence people to learn the mental discipline to separate training situations from bad situations, real life difficulty. And like Tony and Bob both, I believe the instructors have an awful lot to do with that. So you instructors in the back, well, actually, you're not in the back of the room. You're all over the room, aren't you? Well, anyway, I think you have an awful lot to do with that. Maybe some of you already do what I do. Take VFR minimums. We often ask student pilots, so what are the VFR minimums? Oh, 1,000 foot ceiling and 3 miles visibility. Ding, we go, that's right. All right, great. But what we don't do is actually show them what 1,003 looks like in the airplane, in the air. I had a student a couple of years ago that it was getting close to solo, or he was getting close to solo, I should say. And we came out to the airport, and it was worse than I thought. And I said, let's see, 1,103. I said, you ever been up in 1,103? No. How about if you want to go in the traffic pattern? He said, oh, yeah, sure, okay. Because he was getting pretty cocky. He's thinking about solo. And so he thought about it for a while, and then I looked at him. I said, anything different we might need to be concerned about? And he said, no, can't think of anything. So we took off, stayed in the traffic pattern, and around our place, field elevation's around 650 feet. Traffic pattern's 1,000 feet. So along about 1,400 or so, hanging down. And I said, so everything looking good for this first landing? Oh yeah, good. All right, so he's really focused on everything. And suddenly, I said, how are we doing now? And he went, that first shot of adrenaline, that startle factor. And I pulled the throttle back and I said, don't do that again. Okay. because this is what you need to be thinking about when it's 1,003 or 1,103. But he'd never experienced that before. Many instructors don't take people out and show them the difference between the text and real life. And that's really bad. Tony told me that when that happens, that startle effect, most of the brain shuts down, like the prefrontal cortex, which I'm assuming is up here somewhere. But the brain is a blood hog, and it very quickly delivers a stimulant to the muscles. That's the adrenaline. And that's what makes people grip the wheel very hard, or slam the rudders, pushing on the rudder pedals, hoping something's going to get them out of it. But of course, it doesn't. They need to learn. And actually, what you need to do is you need to, if you're going to be a good pilot, you need to be able to take a few deep breaths, because I don't care what's going on, you're not going to die in 5 seconds. Again, that is just about as long as it takes to get that initial adrenaline rush out of your system, so you can focus on the instruments that hopefully you know how to interpret. But again, that's yet to be seen. But of course, do you know how to interpret those instruments? Think about what you needed. For those of you that have a private, how many hours of instrument training did you actually need in order to take your check ride? And so I'll save you the trouble. For those of you that don't remember, 3. Let's see. There we go. 3. There we go. And just like Mike was trying to show me how to run PowerPoint, I didn't get it the first time. And when you're away from flying on instruments, except when the instructor puts that plastic bib on you, you're not going to remember it either. So I really think that the 3 hours that we require of people before they take their private ride is just, it's a travesty. It really is. Because the other issue is that, what do we always train pilots to do if you get into a bad situation? Make a 180 and get out, right? But if you make a 180 and you don't really have any instrument experience, and you get yourself into a snow shower like I did, the chances of you turning the airplane around without losing control are not very good. And let's be honest here. The VFR into IMC is really only the precipitator. It isn't what kills you. It's what comes after that kills you, because pilots lose control of the airplane. So if you try that without any instrument training, it's probably not going to end well. Now, see IFR weather coming. I've got down here. As Mike said earlier, it's much more difficult at night. One of my stations when I still worked for the FAA, any of you flight simmers might remember that Flight Sim opened up at Chicago Meigs Field down along the lakeshore, and it just was an icon. But it was right along the lake, and probably with the north-south runway. From about 010 to about 150 was out over the lake, which at night, when the visibility was less than maybe 7, just totally pitch black. Just pitch black. No up, no down, no left, no right. And we lost so many airplanes out of Meigs at night, with people taking off to the north and making a right turn out to the east, and they would fly right into the water, because they didn't even realize they were descending into the water. Another thing that Tony Kern mentioned to me that I learned early on in my flight instructor experience was that professionals, dentists, doctors, really intense business people, they often think that because they're so good at what they do, that flying will just be, they'll be astounding at it. And aviation is different. It is absolutely different. And people's egos are really what make this kind of training even more difficult, because they got it. I mean, they don't really need this after all. But think about that poster that most of us have seen about aviation being very unforgiving of carelessness or neglect. Just remember that if you do encounter VFR, IMC weather, it usually doesn't happen the way it hit me. You can often see it coming. For goodness sake, if you see it coming, turn around while you still can, or at least alter course around it. That's really important. Now, one more story that I just want to leave with you. Actually, two more brief stories, but my friend John and Martha told me a story about they were in their 210 flying from San Diego up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I should know this. Should be South Dakota. But they got stuck up on top because they went VFR on top, and they lost the generator. Battery went dead. They lost all their radios, and now they're stuck up on top of the clouds trying to get down. And of course, what could possibly make it any worse? The sun was going down. But anyway, luckily they managed to get down in one piece. They lived. And John said to me, we learned just how stupid a pair of allegedly bright people can be when they want to reach their destination. We also learned that the two of us were the biggest risk in the airplane. So now my one last story. July of 2019, 18 months ago, a Caravan on floats, which is a big Cessna turboprop, was on floats and took off from Vancouver, British Columbia for a VFR charter flight up to a fishing lodge about 200 miles to the northwest. And the airplane had the pilot and 8 passengers. Now, an hour and a half later, the airplane crashed about 10 miles short of the destination. The pilot and 3 of the passengers died. 4 other passengers survived with serious injuries, and 1 survived with minor injuries. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada performed the investigation, of course, and they found out that the pilot had checked the weather, and that the VFR, they don't say VFR not recommended, but the forecast indicated to him that the weather was going to be way below VFR when he got to his destination. After encountering, I'm going to read from it here, after encountering poor weather conditions, the pilot continued the flight in reduced visibility without recognizing the rising terrain around him. Of course not. He couldn't see it. Although this is one that I really thought was interesting, and you fellows and ladies that fly turbine equipment, although the aircraft was equipped with advanced avionics, I'm thinking maybe TAWS or something like that, it was configured in such a way on this charter airplane that it was ineffective in alerting the pilot to the terrain. Go figure. I still don't understand that one. But the day of the accident, the charter flight was one of 3 that were all headed to the same destination from Vancouver. One pilot looked at the weather and said, I ain't going. I'm not going. Now, another pilot of a company airplane was ahead of the accident airplane, and he called back on the company frequency and said, hey, the weather around the lodge is awful. Heavy rain and visibility of no more than 1 mile. The pilot didn't stop. He didn't turn around. Didn't even alter course. Could have landed someplace else. Never did it, and flew the thing into the terrain. It's really sad because he had multiple opportunities to turn around, but he never did it. So why? What goes through a pilot's mind when they do that? It's pretty simple. I can handle this. Well, real pilots can do this. Have none of us been there probably at some point? So anyway, what I'd like to leave you with is a short list that I'd be happy to send to you as well. I'll give you my contact info later. But I put together a top 10 list of 13 items that I called how not to become a VFR into IMC statistic. And the first one is, if you do enter weather, don't panic. Take a breath. Take a breath and try and hold the airplane as steady as you can. If you're training, whether it's as a private pilot or even as a refresher, get some solid instrument training. It can save your life. Don't trust, I'm sorry, that's a bad one. Trust the airplane's instruments, not your senses, because they will lead you down a bad path. Because again, your brain is seeing something that's not there. Your instruments are giving you the accurate picture, but you need to be able to interpret them. Demand that your instructor, if you've never done it up to this point, never flown in 1003, have an instructor go take you out there and see what it looks like before you encounter it on yourself. Because the key of tonight is to recognize the conditions before you get into them, if possible. And again, at night, it's not so easy. When that little voice in your head starts saying, this doesn't look so good, listen, turn around while you still can. Don't panic. Breathe. Learn to use the autopilot. Again, we talked about how we have such great equipment in a 172 these days with a G1000 NXI in it or something like that. And there's no reason to not teach a pilot how to use the autopilot. If nothing else, just to hold the wings level and to be able to make a turn using the heading bug. I mean, that could save your life. Set personal minimums. Everybody talks about them all the time and hardly anybody does it. But when you do set some personal weather minimums, just don't violate them, no matter what. Because every one of these accidents, actually probably most accidents, begin with the pilot violating some little itsy-bitsy regulation somewhere. And they just do a little more and a little more. So understand when you get your weather briefing that forecast weather is a blessing and less than forecast weather is a warning. So listen to what you're reading or hearing. Continually assess your flight conditions and your alternates while airborne. Do not take off, even in VFR conditions, without knowing where you will go in case of bad weather. At least a direction. Oh my gosh, we're going north, and that's really, I know, I checked it. I'm going back west. Well, maybe in your case, going west will take out over the ocean eventually, but maybe east or south. But again, have a basic plan in the back of your head that immediately you know which way you're going to go because you know for certain where VFR weather is. One thing I forgot to mention with our caravan pilot a few minutes ago, the one thing the Transport Safety Board of Canada, I don't know how they got this information, but they believed that the accident was also precipitated by the fact that those 8 fishermen on board the airplane may have pressured the pilot into continuing because they were only 10 miles from the destination. What's the big deal, right? So train yourself and your passengers. Don't push, you're the final authority on weather, on operation of the airplane. Even if you are just a private pilot, you have to be firm and you have to say, I'm sorry, we're not going there. It's not safe. And finally, 121.5, call for help on 121.5, but only if you're able to maintain control of the airplane. Fly the airplane first. It's more important than anything else. 121.5 may be able to help you find some VFR weather, but they're no good to you if you can't maintain control of the airplane. So that's all I have. And I just want to
questions from the floor if you want.
Oh, well, we're going to do that. Wait, let me pull up my cool screen here. Let's see. Advanced sharing. No, that's not it. Oh, Mike, I lost it again. No. I'm hopeless. I'll never learn to fly.
Just take a breather. We'll walk you through this. Just click that share screen button down at the bottom. You get a list of screens to share.
Ah, yes, there it is.
Pick the one you want. Nobody wants to see my screen shared.
Oh, so we'll switch to the next one. Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Way.
What is that?
For those of you that can't see it, that's a Dassault Falcon 8X. I had the fun of flying summer before last over in France. But again, once we get through our questions, if you have other ones, please do reach out to me on email. If you're a social media person, I'm at Jetwine on Twitter and Instagram. And I really, really, really want to thank you for inviting me tonight. And I invite you to join Scott Spangler, my editor at Jetwine, where we've been producing some, I think, really astounding content since 2006. And you'll find, and I'll tell you what, if you send me an email and you subscribe, we'll give you one of these dandy Jetwine buttons that you can proudly wear around your airport, where they say, "What the Sam Hill is that on your hat?" Or if you go to Oshkosh, a few people may know it. But anyway, again, thank you very much. Let's take some questions, Mike.
Sure. I got one question here. You were talking about the little minuscule bit of instrument training that a private pilot gets. And a question came up from Jeff about what is the difference between simulated IFR and real IMC?
Ah, that's a great question. I thought, at least I can only go back to my first time in the clouds in a 182. I was with an instructor, and it was the most incredible experience I ever remember, going up into the clouds and then just looking out. Look out the window just for a second. Okay. Oh, I looked back down on the screen and I said, this is easier than it was when I had that stupid plastic hood on. And as we continued to climb, it started to get light, and then we popped out of the clouds. And I went, whoa, that is really cool. So that's the difference. Flying around with foggles or a plastic hood is not reality. It just isn't. And if you have an instrument rating or you're getting one, please go out in the clouds with someone that's qualified and experience the difference between flying in the clouds with for real as opposed to with plastic junk on your head.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. And I had a similar experience as well. And I'm very thankful that my initial instructor, a woman down here at Orange County Airport, took me in actual IMC when I was a student pilot at 16 years old. And I actually used it fairly early on. But as an instrument instructor, I know one of the common reactions I see of the clients I fly with is they look around inside the cloud, and it really hits home that this is for real. You can't get out of it. If you're flying with a hood in VMC conditions somewhere, you can just take the hood off and you've instantly got a horizon. But if you're in a cloud, you can't get out of it necessarily. So this one's for all the marbles. You really have to know what you're doing and be comfortable in there before you get there.
And you have to trust the instruments.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And my first experience with this was my first cross country after I got my private pilot's license in a 152 into Santa Barbara, and ended up delayed for, as always happens. And now I'm on approach at night onto runway 25. And they asked me to do a left 360 for spacing so they could get in a United behind me. And as soon as I make that turn, I get off the coast, there's no moon, there's a high overcast layer of clouds, and I am, for all intents and purposes, I am IMC right now. And boy, was I glad I had actual experience with my instructor. And I did just what you said. I got on the gauges right away. I maintained my altitude around the turn and successfully came out of it the other side, obviously. But yeah, you never know when those skills are going to become important. Let's see. And Thomas says, yeah, he's a helicopter pilot. He says, all of this applies to us as well. And you commented on that early on. And they're at greater risk. This is a huge problem in the EMS, the helicopter EMS. What's that stand for even? Emergency medical support
service, right.
Those pilots have a serious problem with this, and they've really tried to tighten up the training in that industry, and it's gotten much better in the last few years, but it's still a real issue.
Well, and maybe your commenter might confirm this, but what hurts EMS pilots is that they're very mission focused. There's some poor person that's been in an auto accident that they've just picked up, and they want to rush them to the hospital to save their life, and they go, it's really not that, but this poor man or woman is dying, and I'm not going to be the one to kill them along the way. And unfortunately, they often kill everybody on board.
Right. And one of the solutions that they implemented is they no longer tell the pilot what the status of the passenger is. So the passenger doesn't get invested in the patient. And there's a hard line between them, and you got the medical staff in back who's seeing to the patient. The pilot is not made aware of that. So hopefully that kind of reduces that level of pressure for the pilot. So we had another great question from a client of mine, actually. He says, what are the best icing forecast tools?
Well, I'm not going to even try to get into icing forecasts because there are really some great tools out there, and I don't say that to avoid the answer, but I mean, that's almost one of the problems, I think, being an old guy, that I see with flying in GA airplanes these days, is that you have so much information that you are privy to that you can almost become like a robot. Say, oh, I'll just check this tool and okay, good to go. And they blast off and they don't actually analyze what they've seen. I watched that with a flight review. Well, it wasn't last year, it was the year before. And I said, okay, before we go, what does this mean to you right now? Well, we're probably not going to get any ice. Okay, but what if we do? Well, we shouldn't. Ah, yes, you're right. We shouldn't. How many of you have ever said, that's not supposed to happen? Gee, the gear is supposed to come down. But what do you do if it doesn't? And that's what we are planning for all the time. That's what keeps us up at night. So I don't mean to avoid the great icing tool question, but we could spend an hour just on that.
Oh, yes, we could. We actually, somebody did point out the SKU-T log P chart, which is an excellent chart. And in your absence last month, our presentation was a local instructor who has spent a lot of time in these charts. So he gave us a really good talk on what that SKU-T chart is trying to tell you. And I provided a link down in the chat box to a recording of that presentation from last month. So if you're curious about
this was a trick question.
No, it was somebody different who asked the original question. So
okay,
but he's right. Who is it? It was Tom who suggested that chart. I agree. You can see airborne icing, and you can see the lowest, the bottom of the layer and the top of the layer. You can get a real good picture from that chart, but it's a confusing chart. It takes some practice to be able to read that. So I would encourage you to go back and look at last month's webinar, and that's a great introduction to it. If you ever get a chance to find any presentation by Scott Denstadt, he is an expert on weather. He's got a wonderful app called Weather Spork. It does cost money to subscribe to that, but it will draw you a beautiful picture of what's going on with the weather, including icing and turbulence and other issues. So
absolutely. He wrote a great book too.
Yes, he
Although
did.
I can't remember the title right now, but it was a great book, or it still is.
I can't either. Let's see. And Jim points out, of course, 1-800-WX-BRIEF can answer almost any question you've got about weather prior to your flight.
Okay, there's a great question, Mike. I mean, if we had a poll, how many people have dialed 1-800-WX-BRIEF in the last 2 years? I'll bet not many.
Boy, not me. Last
Gary
time I
raised
did.
his hand. All right, glad to see that. I when I'm in the car and I want to get a last minute check of that, I mean, it's a piece of cake. You can do it on a phone that you can link the audio in the car and just go, hey, I just want a last minute check before I get to the airport of, which way was that bunch of cells moving, or, well, actually, you don't get a lot of thunderstorms over there, do you?
And not a whole lot usually. Last time I called it, I was in the back seat of a car from the Reno Air Races back down to Tahoe, where my airplane was. Spent the entire trip on the phone on hold trying to get through.
That's when you need the other tools.
Yes, and Tom points out that even if you're in VMC, the see and avoid of other aircraft in particular is still up to you, even when you're on an IFR flight plan.
Oh,
so, absolutely true. Yep.
And there's nothing worse than being in the clouds. I mean, actual IFR, and say maybe being inside the marker, and air traffic says traffic 11 o'clock and a mile and a half. Moving from left to right, and you go, oh, shit.
You've got a friend of mine now is retired air traffic controller at Austin, Texas, and he says every time they'd have somebody out there just motoring around VFR on a VFR squawk, they know there's clouds out there.
And it's the same thing that they probably could have told you the cloud clearances, 500 below, 1,000 above, 2,000, but they didn't get it. They just did not get it that right above me could be some airplane descending out of the clouds. So,
yep. Timothy asks, what are the pros and cons of synthetic vision as an additional resource?
I think because of course, ForeFlight now offers that. And I just think it's really cool. I mean, it is, if you've not flown an approach, or even been VFR, where there is into a sparsely populated area or something like that at night, where there is no horizon or very few lights, and you try to do it with synthetic vision, you go, whoa, it is like someone turned on the lights, because you can see everything. Now, I grant you, I would not want to use that as my primary means of navigation, that, hey, I can weave my way through the rocks here because I've got my synthetic vision. I don't trust any electronic that much, but it is really cool. If you haven't seen it, go get a demonstration of it. I think Garmin has one up on their site, but wow, it is really cool. Now, see, that would have been what I would have said if I could have remembered all the icing apps earlier on, but I just couldn't.
Yeah, oh, I get it. I wished I'd remembered to turn it on a few years ago. I was flying home from Oshkosh. Actually, John was my co-pilot. I believe he's in the meeting here tonight. And we were going across Colorado through the Rockies with some rain, some precipitation in the area, skirting around some stuff. And afterwards, after I landed, I thought, why didn't I turn on the synthetic vision? That would have been a really nice tool to have right then.
Well, and what's even worse is that when someone points it out to you and you go, Right. I just didn't think of that
Yep.
because it happens. It does. We all have moments like that.
Yep.
You just don't want to have too many moments like
Well,
that.
and it kind of gets to what you said early on. When you're presented with this situation, it's going to take a couple of seconds. There's a few moments of panic as you realize the situation you're in. And when you're in that few seconds there, you're not always the clearest thinker that you've ever been. And all these ideas, these resources that you might have available are not always obvious to you in that moment.
No, that's right. Because as Tony mentioned earlier, your brain is your whole system is so flooded with adrenaline that you basically just freeze up,
Yep.
and you can't think. It's not that you're stupid and everyone else is smart, but when you train in more sophisticated airplanes, jets and what have you, the first I remember the silence the bell, because you'd have a bell going off in the cockpit that sounded like a doorbell with somebody leaning on the damn button, and that was supposed to warn you of some situation, but it usually freaked everybody out because you can't think of anything. And so the first command was always silence the bell,
Right.
because you've got to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 seconds to say, okay, what are we doing? We're still flying. The airplane's not on fire. What do we know? It's a process, but it only works if you've trained like that.
Yep. Silence the bell and wind your watch.
That's right.
Let's
Oh
see.
God, we're acting our age, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's see. So that's really kind of all the questions. The helicopter guy who mentioned, we talked about a moment ago, he says, yeah, his employer is very respectful of the go, no go decision. They have a company hard minimum of 1 mile visibility and 800 feet. And that's a great idea. That's in the GA world, we would call that a personal minimum. And that's a great idea. I would also point you toward Jolie Lucas has a series that she's been doing. I think she's got 2 of them out now. Maybe she's on the 3rd one on the issue exploring personal minimums. So find that on the AOPA Opinion Leaders blog and dig that up. Give that a read on that subject.
And you don't have to be just a Mooney girl to use it.
It helps. Mooney girls tend not to get in that kind of problem.
Yeah, that's probably true. But hi, Jolie. I think you're out there someplace, and John too, wherever you are.
And Jim asks, what about thoughts on the free app Flight Plan Go? Have you ever used that?
No, I have not actually.
I do, and I have it. I've used it, and it's great. It's free. If you're a cheap airline pilot like me, it's great.
Well, and one thing I will say again, and just because I'm not trying to sound like the old experienced guy, but I do worry that there's so much gear in an airplane, and I know what I do on a. I will not use Zoom as the my experience level here, but I just like working with Microsoft Word. I mean, there are hundreds of applications in Microsoft Word, but what you probably do is you probably learn the 5 or 6 or 7, and then you use those all the time. And I remember the first time that let's see, did I mute? There we go. The first time we were told to enter a hold, and the captain said, "Okay, well, let's just do it automatically. Punch it in the FMS." And I went, okay. Now I'd read about it and I'd punched it in on the ground just to see where the menus were. But in the pinch, while we were flying, getting a hold outside Minneapolis while we were whatever else, I mean, I couldn't remember how to do it. So you've got to practice. And that's where the flight sim part comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, if simulators are your deal, I think we're just about ready to bring on the FAPA simulator. We have a Redbird TD2 flight simulator that we've just updated now. It's got the modern database with all the SIDS and stars in it, and it will have the capability of connecting your iPad to it. So it's a G1000, can be a 172 or a 182. But what a great way to learn how to use these devices, these iPads, predominantly in the cockpit without burning 100 octane, without risking a mid-air collision or a collision with terrain, not having to deal with ATC. Is a great way to practice it.
Well, and there are a lot of people, and for those of you that are flight simmers, I urge you to send me an email or follow me or something and tell me what you're up to, because I was a flight simmer back in the old days, but now that the Flight Sim 2020 is here, boy, it's a lot more complicated than the first one was, and it's like getting into that Falcon and somebody saying, "Well, go take her for a spin." I mean, you got to figure out how to start the engines.
Right.
But I'd love to hear from anybody that's further ahead than me in flight simming and some of the issues you've run into. But again, I just really want to thank everybody for putting up with a guy from Illinois. And I think now that I think back on it, I should have known that you guys would try to pull one of these icing forecast app questions on a guy from the Midwest. It's easy. You just don't go where the ice is. It's very simple.
Go the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're curious about that book by Scott Denstadt, George put a link to that down in the chat box, and Jolie put a link to the first of her pieces on personal minimums. The series is called Into the Alligator's Mouth, and I recommend you give it a read. It's a good one.
That's a good one. Thank you.
Let's see. If you want to take some open mic questions, we do have a hand or two up here.
Sure.
Try that. All right, Michael.
No more icing questions. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Let's see. Michael, did you have a question? He's got to figure out how to unmute. His hand's still up. I'm not sure he meant to do that. Oh, he says no. So, okay, I'll lower his hand then. And let's see. We don't have any other questions that I can see at the moment. Santosh, give it your best here. What do you got?
All right. Great presentation talk. The thing that I wanted to mention is for me, when I ran into IMC inadvertently, what happened was that I had gotten a weather brief, a combination of me delaying a little bit, fumbling around to make sure, being OCD, getting everything right on the ground before I take off, and the weather coming in early. And I had no way of really knowing that other than maybe Flight Watch. I ran into IMC at nighttime in the dark. I didn't even know I was in IMC until when it came down to descend for approach to land. And that's when I realized, when ATC asked me if I could see the runway lights, and I couldn't see anything. And so now with in-flight data link weather, whether it be through FSB, whether through ADSB or through
XM,
XM, Sirius XM weather. Any thoughts on how that could be helpful?
Well, I think any weather information that you can receive in the cockpit while you're flying is going to be helpful. But like many other kinds of information, you need to understand the limitations of that information. XM, for instance, or it's not real time. You do not want to try to pick your way through the bad weather using that data linked weather, because it is I don't know, it could be 10 minutes old, 15 minutes old. So you may be looking at where the weather was when you get your display or you get your data from. And again, that's why they say, don't ever try to pick your way through IMC weather with that, because it's a good way to kill yourself. And there have been quite a few accidents actually where people tried it anyway, and they proved that the experts were right. So, but otherwise, I think it's a great improvement over what we had in the old days.
Yeah, and the last time I had an inadvertent encounter with it was out of Fullerton. I was on my way home from LAX from work, and I thought, well, what a great chance. I'll go get night current. And so I checked the weather. The weather was good in the basin. I was seeing stars, no clouds at all. So I get to the hangar. It's after hours. The tower's closed now. And I go fire up my airplane. And I'm just going to go do 3 circuits and get my night landings. And I get on the downwind leg, and I see puffs of cloud going through the landing light. And I thought, this is not good. So I actually chopped the power, and I did a 180, and I landed opposite direction on the runway and gave up the flight. So I had checked everything, and it was okay. And what you're talking about, Rob, with these weather, even an ASOS or an AWOS, take a read sometime, study that device, and learn about the delays that are involved with the presentation, especially of visibility. It has to sense a ceiling for quite a period of time before it will report a ceiling. And then once that ceiling clears, it takes quite a long time for it to report that it's cleared again too. So not just the radar has a delay, which I've been talking about the delay in the FISB radar data, XM and ADSB weather radar data, but there's also a delay built into AWOS and ASOS.
And since you mentioned radar, remember that air traffic radar is not the same frequency as the uploaded weather, and ATC often cannot see anything other than maybe the heaviest areas of precipitation. So you do not want to try to pick your way. You know, when you all come out to Oshkosh, hopefully this year, you do not want to try to pick your way around thunderstorms, you know, using that. And honestly, I would never even consider tackling convective weather in an airplane without radar, at least, or at least the ability to climb above it so that we can see it. And because that's all we ever do once we, you know, get up high, is we steer around the weather. We don't necessarily have to turn back because we can see it coming, and often it's you know, we'll take 10 degrees left or 10 degrees right, and we clear it by a long distance because we can see it 100 miles away. But in the clouds, in a small airplane with no radar, you're doing this. You really are. You're just saying, I hope I don't hit anything. And it's not good.
And by radar, we're talking about onboard weather radar. We're
Yes,
not
I'm
talking
sorry.
about
Right.
any kind of satellite or ADSB. So
Correct.
let's see. Michael's got a question here. Go ahead. What do you got, Michael?
Hi, Rob. Thanks for the presentation tonight.
Oh, thank you.
It wasn't really a question, more than an experience that over the summer in August, I was on my way up to Oregon for an event and ran into smoke from the fires that even 1-800-WX-BRIEF couldn't really give me any information on. And although I could see it and I could see to the ground, I couldn't get over it, couldn't get around it. And all of a sudden I ended up between layers, and I could see blue skies in every direction, but above me and below me. And it just felt like it was too risky to keep going because it could have closed in on me at any moment. So I ended up making a U-turn, landed back where I had refueled in Sacramento, and drove 9 hours to the destination. But it's something that they couldn't really forecast. And I think it's important everybody be aware during fire season. At 14,000 feet, there was no way for me to get over it. Even, you know, I had oxygen, but so many people would probably have thought about continuing because they could see blue, and it gives you a little sense of hopefulness. But I wonder what your thoughts are on something like that. For, you know, I'm a pilot with about 360 hours and flying my Mooney, and so I just turned around.
And no instrument rating.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Obviously, are you a Mooney girl?
No, I'm a Mooney guy.
Okay, I didn't know what the proper terminology was. I was hoping totally.
I run the West Coast Mooney. I run the West Coast Mooney Club.
You know,
it's hilarious.
Me, there's nothing. Well, let's face it. Why do people not want to turn around?
I don't know.
Especially if they've got people on board. It makes them look like they don't know what they're doing, or that they're afraid. And especially if it's maybe a flying buddy in the other seat, and you don't want to have to turn around and go, oh, I couldn't handle it, and especially when you get a little glimpse of something like you did that said, maybe it's not really so bad out there. I'll just kind of keep going because we're only 10 miles away, like that poor guy in the caravan. But you're assuming that it's going to get better. but it could just as easily, it's 50-50. It could just as easily get much worse. So when, again, that little voice comes up, man, listen to it. I think you did exactly the right thing.
But I think it's important. Thank you. And I think it's important that everybody knows that, you know, you read the stories about, you know, what other pilots have experienced and what they've gone through. And I don't want to be one of those people. And since there's no real forecast for smoke, even ATC didn't know where, you know, what the visibility was like. So I just thought it'd be wise to have everybody be aware of that, especially during fire seasons in California.
Well, and for those of you that may not have followed it, I mean, that fire season this past year was so bad, the smoke eventually made its way to Europe, and it was just incredible. And so you are among one of probably many pilots who had never seen. I don't think I've ever seen smoke that thick that you couldn't easily go around. But again, that's something we've never been trained to do. And an instructor might say, "Have you ever experienced smoke?" Yeah, it's not too bad. You just kind of look down through it. You can smell it. I mean, that's how you know.
That was bad enough. I ended up leaving my plane in Sacramento for 3 weeks.
Well, good move.
Because you just couldn't get it out.
The first time I did that, I thought, "Oh my gosh, is the airplane on fire?" What? I mean, that's the first thing that went through my mind. And then the 5 seconds passed, and I started to breathe, and I said, "We can't be." But anyway, again, I think you did absolutely the right thing.
Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you very much.
So we had a question from Tom. Says, how do you keep from flying into IMC during a night flight?
Oof. You get a really good weather briefing. And one thing that I have found is that if you're flying VFR at night, try to stay around an area where there are lots of lights on the ground so that you have reference to visual conditions. Because if you're going to go out and fly out over the desert, even if you're VFR, you'll never know when you get into something or not until you're in it. And I know people that when they start getting a little concerned, they flip the landing light on, because as you saw, Mike, you'll see that going past the light. You know, whoa, what was that? Was it a bird? No, it was a cloud, and it's trying to tell you something. But be aware, flying VFR at night, when the forecast is for something, I don't know, 5-6 miles, and maybe you know, less than 2,000 foot overcast, it's possible. You just don't know what you're going to run into until you do, and you need an exit plan.
Yep. Let's see. And then looks like Santosh might have another question, and then I think we'll close it up.
Sorry, I was sort of reaching for the unmute button. Regarding just my follow-up to the in-flight data link stuff, one of the things that is upcoming is in-flight internet with the new companies, SpaceX, Virgin Orbit, whatever, all putting low Earth orbiting satellites to provide internet access. And I always notice that the internet, whether even though it's both have delays at SiriusXM and whatnot, is a higher quality product. Do you think that could actually be a benefit in this type of a scenario, as opposed to just XM?
Could be. Again, realize that as the PIC, you're supposed to be watching the airplane. And like you do, this is, of course, why they tell people not to text while they drive. Because, you know, did you ever notice if you ever drive and you just try to look over when it's in one of those cup holders or whatever, it doesn't take but 2 seconds. And you go, whoa, you know, and you realize that, you know, you're across the yellow line or you're headed to the ditch, and it happens so quickly. You really need to be able to train yourself or have someone do it, that you can just glance at something like that and not focus on it if you are in marginal weather. I mean, if it's clearing 40 miles, it's not that big a deal. but of course, then you probably wouldn't need it, the internet access anyway. But again, it's when it's marginal that the world starts closing in on you, and you need to try to stay ahead of the airplane any way that you can. And again, that may be a great option, but you still need to be able to fly the airplane. Maybe that's when you have it on autopilot. Say, in case anything happens here, I'll just hit the heading bug and turn myself out of this. But again, you just can't depend on the electronics too much, I think.
That's what I was gonna say is, like, would autopilot and or trims, flying with your feet, be your best friend? That way your hands are free and you don't have to worry about departing the airplane while you quickly check for weather hole or alternatives.
And one other thing I would suggest, in addition to that list of 13 things that you've got there, Rob, one technique that I like to do is that if I am if I'm doing sort of a scud running type situation, if I feel like the visibility is starting to close in on me, or the clouds, the ceiling's lowering or whatever, slow down. That gives you more time. And in addition to your excellent point about always having a plan B, have your solid gold VFR alternate, know where that is, make that decision point. And John will attest to this. When we were flying through the Rockies, we identified decision points and what the options were. The point by which we needed to make our decision about what we were going to do. Was it going to be plan B or plan C, or could we continue with plan A? And then when we got to that point, we identified it. Okay, here's what we got. Here's our minimum. We need to decide, this looks good, we can continue. And we did this several times over the course of this, probably an hour from Rollins Pass to Grand Junction, I think it was. And so that you're not wondering in the moment, what am I going to do? You've already got your options sorted out, and you're not floundering for a decision at that moment.
And you're right, because that, of course, takes valuable time. And
Yes.
when you say, this is the no-go, we're going south.
Yep.
Absolutely, just crank it south and you're going, because as you said, you've already planned that. But if that sneaks up on you and you're in the clouds, that's why most of these VFR encounters with the clouds are fatal.
Yeah, you don't have any spare brain cells at that point. My friend, Captain Brian Schiff, he phrases it this way. He says, the best safety feature on an airliner is the fact that the captain doesn't care where his suitcase spends the night. And it looks like we got a question from Tom. One last.
Hey guys, thank you, Rob, for the presentation. This is really more of a kind of a follow-up, kind of a comment type of a thing. On the smoke, I was actually flying back from Northern California when those fires were kicking off, and it was incredible how fast those fires expanded. And in fact, I made a report to ATC just noting new fires as we're getting into the basin, and even up on the coast. It was amazing how fast those fires were coming. We diverted east because the winds were out of the east to avoid that. I mentioned that because the smoke will appear on SIGMETs. Just as an FYI, those will come up on SIGMETs. I want to make sure that you can find those actually in some reports. And so the second thing on the comment about night flying, I was taking off out of, and this is just like an add-on to what you were saying. I was taking off out of Henderson, and Rob, you mentioned like looking down and texting. I looked down at my nav. I don't know, it was a late flight, no moon. It was pure VFR. There were no clouds in the sky. But taking off out of Henderson westbound, looking down and then looking up and thinking everything was fine, glancing at my attitude indicator and my turn coordinator, hey, I'm in a pretty strong left-hand turn. How did that happen? And it's real, and it happens real quick. It happens real quick.
No, that's a really interesting point, and people say, I can't believe I did that. But think about it. Most of us fly with our left hand, and when you look down, it's almost natural to just move your arm just a little bit, and of course, wherever your arm goes, the hand that's holding the wheel goes with, or you do something off the pilot's, and it doesn't take long at all And that's pretty scary when it happens to you the first time, especially when you're alone.
Yep. Any tips for flight instructors to break that habit of the heavy hand? I still have that happen so much with students.
Trim,
three fingers.
Trim the airplane. Teach the student or the other pilot to show me how well this airplane flies without your hand on the wheel. In fact, if you can see it in the background here, that's an A380 behind me. I'm not really there. It's just a picture, just so you guys knew. But I had a chance to fly that thing some years back when I was over in Toulouse, and the Airbus demonstration pilot was so enamored. Oh, we'll be climbing out. We'll go to 3,000 feet and do some VFR work, and we'll turn on the automation. I said, I don't want to fly it on automation. I just want to hand fly it, because I thought it would be really cool to just hand fly this big sucker. And it was amazing because it works just like it does in a 150. If you trim it, you can just let go of the stick and it flies normally. And we need to break people of the habit of saying you've always got to have your hand on the wheel or the stick. You don't. You need to watch it, all right, and you need to watch what the airplane's doing. But that gives you a way to just look down or look over at something else and not take the airplane with you.
Yeah, one of the techniques that I've used is, especially in the landing pattern, but I'll ask the pilot. I can see that the airplane's not stable and it's not wanting to keep doing what it's doing. I'll ask him, what's going to happen if you let go of the yoke right now?
Yes.
And especially in a 182 on final approach, typically the answer is the nose is going to drop. And Michael, I think I've asked Michael this too in his Mooney, okay, so let go of it. Watch what happens. The nose drops. Trim it so it doesn't do that. You should always be able to let go of the yoke and the airplane should continue to do what it's doing. And if you can do that, then the airplane is in much better trim. It's a better flying airplane. It's a better experience for your passengers. It's easier for you, less exhausting, less fatiguing. And
easier. Yes, that's a very good word, because so many people say, I'm so tired. I mean, probably because you have early on a death grip on the wheel, or the control wheel, or the stick. And just, it doesn't need to be that hard, but you need to prove it to yourself. And that's what trim is for.
Yep. Let's see, and Leighton suggests, have a stationary contact point for that arm and orientate before looking around. Same with driving and riding or cycling. Same idea. You just talked about for a moment, go reach over to, adjust the temperature in your car. It's the same thing. Right, and Gary's got a question, it looks like.
Yeah, I want to just share something that when I anticipate any kind of entry into IMC conditions, I actually wear a baseball cap and I'll pull it down just as I'm taking off, even knowing that I'm about to enter clouds, 800, 1,000 feet, but having the visor down helps get my whole brain focused on the instrument panel, and I get less of that stimulation from outside that could end up turning my head upside down. I found that to work really well and just wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And probably one of the hardest things to do is entering IMC and then exiting and entering again. If you're flying right at the bottom of an overcast layer and you're in and out of the clouds, that is really difficult. Just stay on the instruments. It makes everything easier.
It's fun when you're the non-flying pilot. You can watch all the clouds going by, but not with PIC.
Yep.
I was IFR Sunday, and they had me right at the tops of the clouds. I was in and out for about 20, 25 minutes. And
nice.
It was a very strange feeling, because I'm looking down for almost everything and I saw blue light. So I looked up and I was like, oh, look, and I can see the mountains. So I thought, okay, I have something visual. And then it disappeared again. And by the time I got my head down, I had about a 10-degree bank. It was just so instant. It's amazing.
Yep. If you want here, Rob, I got a video about that. If I can take your screen for a minute and stop sharing and share
Hey,
mine instead.
obviously, I don't know what to do with it.
Let me see if I can do this. And Santosh, looks like you got one more question. Hit it. Make it a
I was
quick
just going
one.
to say, one of the things I remember even Rod Machado mentioned in his presentation is that if you're not actively flying the plane, as in look at your scan, and need to look somewhere else, take your hand off the yoke, assuming you're in trim, which you should be. That way you don't have the leaning effect of, oh, I'm leaning over here, and then you end up pushing your control that way.
This is going into O'Hare, actually, just about 11 or 12,000 feet in the descent for landing into O'Hare in a 737, probably 5 years ago now. But that just hanging out a little bit above a cloud layer is beautiful. It's so much fun. And then you get in it.
Hey, Mike, how do you get that little red ring to follow your airplane all the time?
Oh, that's special. That ring only follows me. Nobody else gets that.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, let's close it out then, unless you got anything else you want to add there.
No, just, hey, come on over to Jet Wine and we'll tell you some great stories. I look forward to it. And really, I've got a whole bunch of these buttons. Oh, wait, I can't. I got a whole bunch of these buttons. Please take them off my hands.
I need one of
your
those.
friends at Oshkosh.
I need one of those. Oh,
yeah.
Like Michael says, he's Lord of the Ring. It's hilarious. And I did post my email address again and the WP number there. If you fling me an email with that WP in it, if you didn't already register for the event, I'll make sure you get your wings credit. And you should have it within the next week or so. I go on my next work trip on Thursday. I might get it done tomorrow, but it might have to wait till next week. So with that, then I will say thank you very much, Rob. It's great having you in. I'm so glad you're able to make it and glad your wife is doing better, more importantly. And I look forward to meeting you at Oshkosh.
Yes, absolutely. I will look forward to that. And please, if you see some other person walking around with one of those stupid little buttons on their hat, just wave. And it's probably me or somebody who knows me. So we'll look forward to it. Again, thank you very much for inviting me out to California. It seems like I just got here and I've got to catch a night flight back.
Yep. Well, it's 8:45. You'll have no problem at all making your flight.
Absolutely. Again,